guys. Welcome back into the Blue White Breakdown, PennLive's Penn State football podcast. It's Maryland week, which usually is a good sign for Penn State when they're going to College Park. But who knows this year? I'm Bob Flounders. Dave Jones is joining me. First of two podcasts. We're going to talk about James Franklin's Tuesday presser, which already has Dave and I chuckling for some of the things he referenced. And we're also going to deal with, as we tape this on a Tuesday afternoon, we're going to talk about the college football playoff. I believe the initial rankings will be released later tonight. Dave's got some thoughts about that. I'm sure we'll get to it later in the week as well. But it's an action-packed show. I know Dave's super psyched. He just returned from Columbus, as did I. The Lions are 5-3, so are the Terps. Dave, how are you doing?
Well, we're going to try to take a holistic viewpoint of the entire press conference. So obviously that's what we do every week. And we're proud to have the opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm laughing. I know Dave's laughing. I think it might've been a question about Mike Yurcich's offense and how he's doing this year. Dave, I've covered Penn State for 20 years. You've done it longer than I have. You ever heard in a press conference, a football press conference, a football coach use the term holistically in a press conference?
I have heard my wife's friends talk about it in relation to vitamin supplements, but not in football terms. No.
So set it up. I know you got some thoughts, but yeah, I think he was asked by Corey Geiger about Mike Yurcich's first season at Penn State. He replaced Kirk Shiraka. Corey referenced the fact that maybe the offensive numbers for Penn State aren't what Franklin and Penn State expected this year. James kind of framed it his own way, and the word holistically came out.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I kind of enjoy the guy. I mean, he's not Brian Harsin, right?
No.
That's great. That's a good thing. That's a good thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
But the question is whether Yurcich has been an upgrade at OC, considering that his offensive stats, right, I guess, are slightly down. I mean, you can parse stats however you want to do them. And Franklin said that you got to look at the performance against top opponents and defenses you've played, and it's like looking at records. They all aren't the same. And then he said you look at data, you must look at it holistically, which I haven't heard except for when people are discussing milk thistle and other holistic remedies. Usually,
is that homeopathic or holistic?
Holistic has a. Do you take milk thistle? My wife
don't.
Does.
I'm gonna start maybe if James is good with it. I'm good with it.
Yeah. It's a whole. Well, anyway, holistic has many different. It means in a whole picture in general, even though it's spelled with an H, I believe, but rather than a WH. And I mean, as far as the actual question, I think Mike Yurcich has been a considerable upgrade. I don't know what you think. And the stats reflect a much different schedule instead of, what did we have at this point last year? We had Indiana, which was a pretty good team, and we had Ohio State, which was a pretty good team, and not lot Nebraska. Of other. Yeah. I mean, and this year we've already had Wisconsin, who was a pretty damn good defense at that time and has regenerated into one. Auburn, Ohio State, and I think the competition. To his point, the competition has been Iowa has been considerably better to this point of the season. So, yeah, I don't know if stats quite say it. Look, when you look with eyeballs, you can see that this offense has adjusted to different situations pretty quickly, with the possible exception of the Iowa game. I think, especially the packages, even the Iowa game, because they were ready to chop up that Iowa defense. I mean, they were going to score 38 points with Clifford if he's out there and he leaves after 3/8 of the game is over and doesn't come back. It's a different situation. I thought the packages for Auburn was good. The package for Ohio State was really good. He knows what he's doing, and he's more he has more versatility in the way he uses his weaponry. To me, I don't think it's really much of a competition. Do you?
I agree with you, Dave. I do think, it just, I hate to harp on it, but to have
offensive line, I know what you're going to say.
All the eggs tied to a healthy Sean Clifford. And if you don't have him pretty close to 100%, it's just, there's not a lot Penn State's offense seems to be able to do. But what I was going to say, Dave, is if you're going to ask a question about a Penn State offensive assistant, I would probably point that loaded gun at the offensive line coach.
Phil Troutwine.
Yeah, Phil Troutwine. I was struck by James' belief that the offensive line, especially in the run game, played more physical in the Ohio State.
Yeah, he did. I almost didn't think I heard that correctly. He thought they played more physically.
He did say that, and he thought they took a step forward. I did not see it that way.
Didn't see it.
I would argue also they did have some yards. They did put together some drives, but I thought, and again, I am not a Penn State fan. I thought Penn State's offensive line got away with 2, 3, 4 holds that were blatant, that really would have submarined some drives. Not only did I not think they played all that well, I thought they should have been flagged a couple of times for some pretty obvious holds. So I don't know if I would agree with the assessment that they played better and more physical against the Buckeyes.
Yeah, it was almost like he was suggesting the running backs aren't quite doing their job well enough, making safeties miss. Did you hear that? Not like they've ever gotten to the second level all that much.
I agree with that, Dave. I think that's.
Yeah, you could agree with that, but I mean,
it's not the offensive line, is what he's saying.
Yeah. Anyway, you can parse that any way you want, but the running game isn't good and hasn't been good. And in that respect, what Yurcich did and put together at Ohio State without any running game, knowing he probably wouldn't have one, and then assembling that package without one is even more impressive to me. I mean, it wasn't even trying to set up the run with the pass. It was just going to be a passing game, and he was going to exploit his advantage, which he thought was clearly their wideouts against Ohio State's secondary. And I think he established that was true. He's good at identifying advantages on the field and exploiting them. He did it against Ohio State.
Right. We've talked about it since Franklin's been at Penn State. He's in his 8th year. As good as Barkley was at Penn State, it was only because he was able to jump over guys and make guys miss in the hole on many of his runs, or even that USC run where he went cross country. That play did not look like it was blocked particularly well either. It is one thing I think that's been true of this offensive line more often than not, is they have not necessarily done a very good job against quality teams creating space for running backs at the line of scrimmage. And if you're asking your runner to consistently make players miss, like Travion Henderson did on that long run, he made that move on Jair Brown after he got into the secondary, which was a big play in the game. You're going to have to get some 5-star running backs instead of some 4-star running backs. That's the difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can say the running backs, Penn State's running backs, are beat up, but everyone's beat up this time of year. To your point about Barkley's run against USC, I mean, there were more than that. He had free rushers coming in at him at all times. That was an inside zone run that ended up way out on the edge. First, he bounced it out. Then he cut back against the grain and pretty much ran away from 4 different defensive backs. Yeah, that's a 5-star guy. And so is Travion Henderson. They don't have those now. They have beat up 3- and 4-star guys. And I mean, at some point, the offensive line has to perform. It really has not. They don't need 180 yards a game rushing. They could get by with 120.
We're talking about, Penn State's running game, the role that Phil Troutwine plays in it, why it's been so not even inconsistent, just not very good this year. James Franklin made a comment at the press conference on Tuesday about being able to make safeties miss. And that to me, and Dave picked up on it, is more of an indictment on the running backs maybe than the offensive line. I didn't think they were very physical in the Ohio State game. James Franklin did. I thought they got away with some holds. But Dave, one of the problems at Penn State in the run game, it's been there really since he got here. It's the running backs are they're 3- and 4-star guys. Saquon Barkley was a 4-star guy who played like a 5- or 6-star guy. The reason he had 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons was probably he could make guys miss in the hole or unblock guys. And even in the Rose Bowl, that sensational run, that defining moment for him, that was not a cleanly blocked play either. He just made a superhuman, athletic move after move on that play to get there. So, I mean, if you're not going to have a 5-star talent like Ohio State's Travion Henderson, who on that run against Penn State on Saturday was able to make a move on Jair Brown to get free about 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, this problem is just going to keep, it's going to keep surfacing, Dave, if your offensive line can't get pushed.
Yeah, they're not getting pushed. They're not getting gaps either. I mean, there's really not a lot for these running backs to do. What happens when they constantly are running into walls is they become hesitant. Any running back will do that. It's like banging your head against a wall. I mean, what I compared it to was, sticking your fist into a running garbage disposal. You get a little leery, and they expect to be hit as soon as they get the ball. That makes your running fluidity lesser.
Right.
If you got a guy like Barkley, he could adapt to those situations. But even if you remember, he became so accustomed to bouncing runs that sometimes he didn't hit holes. And I think you saw that with his first couple of years with the Giants, didn't you? Because he's got another crappy offensive line there. God knows what Saquon Barkley would have done all these years if he'd had even a decent offensive line, right? So I just think that the Penn State's offensive line has to be more functional. They can't expect guys who don't even have nearly the talent of Barkley to make safeties miss. It's not like they're getting to the second level all that often in order to make those safeties miss. And I don't know. Maybe he's trying to spread the blame around because he knows the offensive line is coming in for it. They have pass blocked pretty well, but they have not run blocked well at all. I think everyone agrees to that.
Yeah, Dave. And James did say, he mentioned a couple of errors he thought in the loss to Ohio State. He mentioned a couple of errors he thought were different in a positive way for Penn State. He did mention Sean Clifford, obviously not as limited, or very little of his game was limited in the Ohio State game. And against Illinois, after the first quarter, when they got that 10-0 lead, you could tell he wasn't anywhere near 100%, Dave. And I thought he looked very good, very close to 100%. I was doubtful that he would be, but I didn't think there was much that he couldn't do against Ohio State's defense. And I think that was the difference. He mentioned that Penn State was better on third down. Their offense was able to make some plays on third down to extend some drives, get some rest for the defense. Third down had been an issue, but he also did say they were more physical at the line of scrimmage. The defensive line, I thought, did about all they could against Ohio State. And I would agree with that, missing PJ Mustipher. But that offensive line, Dave, I'm with you. I don't see a more physical offensive line. And I don't know how physical they're going to need to be against Maryland Saturday afternoon at College Park. But they got Michigan and Michigan State on the dance card at some point in the next month. So they're going to get put to the test again. And I don't know that they can pass it.
Well, clearly, the question about Yurcich, whether he's performing, I think he's adapting really well to the situation. And I think he's almost thrown in the towel on the running game to the point where he's not even trying to throw to set up the run. He's just trying to throw the ball and use his advantages. Well, with a healthy Sean Clifford, what are the guys he wants to exploit? He has a good squadron of wideouts, and he has Sean Clifford, who knows what he's doing out there and can make throws. So he's not even trying to use the running game to do much at this point. He doesn't even trust them really, really much on 2nd and 4. I mean, he just throws the ball again. which is what I think we're going to see. If there are weaknesses in any of those teams you mentioned coming up, I think Michigan can be exploited in its back seven. I think Michigan State also can. Both teams did that to each other, and I think it can be done by Penn State. I think Yurcich has pretty much given up on the running game, and he's going to deal with what he has, what he can use. And I think that's the way it's going to have to go. He's going to have to turn into a Big 12 offense like he had at Oklahoma State, where, so much of it really doesn't deal with the running game at all. He's used to it. He can do it.
Dave, I think you make a good point. And I think to illustrate what you said about Mike Yurcich and maybe his frustration with the running game, knowing its limitations, I think there was proof of that in the Ohio State game on Kevon Lee's 1-yard run. He had to scheme up a formation where Kevon Lee was almost like in a 3-back set, like a wishbone. He was the outside back on the right. He had Brenton Strange in the middle behind Sean Clifford. And I think he had another running back to the left. And he had Kevon Lee break from right to left, and the play worked. But that's a formation that I don't know that I've seen on the college level from a Penn State offense. It worked, but he had to do that just to get a yard or two. And I think it speaks to how frustrated he is. And Dave, the other thing is, I'm beginning to wonder how much Penn State misses its old tight ends coach, Tyler Bowen, who left last year to take the job in Jacksonville with Urban Meyer. He was replaced by Ty Howell, a former Penn State center. Dave, I think the Penn State the tight end room is talented, but when you talk about making strides in season, especially either as blockers or as pass catchers, they've dropped some passes that have really hurt Penn State. Illinois, other games, they haven't, I don't think, necessarily been great as blockers. I just wonder maybe if Penn State is suffering from the loss of Tyler Bowen as well.
Yeah, the tight end position has become one such that you almost are defined whether you're going to be a pass catcher, a big guy who gets downfield, like Mike Yurcich was, who was not a great blocker either, or you're going to be used primarily as a blocker. And these guys have been erratic in both respects. Sometimes I think the offensive line has done pretty damn well pass blocking. That has been a strong point of them. So again, what are you going to do? You're going to bang your head against the wall and try to you're essentially wasting downs if you try to run the ball on first down, second and long. It's hopeless. So do what you do well, and you must look at it holistically, I think, Bob, in that respect.
James Franklin is nothing if not creative in some of his responses, and he might. You're right. He might actually be right. I agree that I don't think the stats really indicate the success that Yurcich has had under very challenging circumstances. Dave, the 2020 offense that Kirk Ciarrocca had, whatever those numbers were at the end of the year, and I think just on raw numbers, they were like the number 3 or number 4 offense in terms of total yards in the Big Ten. And it was all built, Dave, on that 4-game win streak against some teams that had either given up, like Illinois and even Michigan, and some teams that were just flawed, as good as Michigan State is this year. And that was one hell of a game they played against Michigan and won on Saturday. That was not the Michigan State team that was on the field when Penn State saw them late in the year at Beaver Stadium, and Rutgers just wasn't very good. And they had become the opposite of this Penn State offense. They were relying on trying to run the ball with Clifford, with Will Levis, with Kevon Lee, and just try and manage the game because they couldn't throw it. They weren't able to generate a passing game other than an occasional big play from Jahan Dotson. So I agree that this is a better Penn State offense, even if the numbers don't bear it out because of the defenses that they've had to go against and some of the limitations they've had. They just have, the running backs have not looked good. They have not been healthy, and the offensive line and the tight ends. I just think it's been a very, very average at best year for all those guys.
All right. Did you get a look at? I thought it was interesting, the pronunciation. Franklin must not watch any NFL or he'd know how to. I didn't know how to pronounce Tagovailoa until probably last year, but he still can't pronounce it.
Yeah,
he wasn't even close. What? Anyway, have you seen much of Maryland? At this point, I think what did James say? He said Tagliavia.
Yeah, he did.
Anyway, his name is Talia Tagovailoa. He's to his younger brother, and he's a very interesting player. If you remember him last season in the 35-19 Maryland win, he had a very good game. And you mentioned Rakim Jarrett when you asked Franklin about that. They're depleted, and this could have been, had all their guys at wideout been healthy, could have been one hell of a matchup between what I thought when the season began was at least as good a wideout squadron as Ohio State's. And that is saying a lot because these guys were really, really good. Right. But Jayshon Jones and Dante Demas are out with season-ending injuries. You still have Jarrett, who's terrific and is a five-star talent. And you got Carlos Carriere, who has been like a third stringer, had 2 TDs last year. You still got talent. But what do you think of the matchup of Tagovailoa and those wideouts and that game where they do a little bit of RPO, a little bit of other stuff against Penn State's back four, who I think they were outstanding again against Ohio State. This is the best back four they've ever had since I've been here. I mean, it's the best back four Penn State's ever had. I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah, and we're going to get really into this matchup in our next podcast. But yeah, you're right. To me, just an early tip off. I think if you're Brent Pry and you're Penn State's defense, you want to make. I call him Tagovailoa, but that's not right. It's Tagovailoa, correct? Do I have that right? Tagovailoa, Talia. So I just think you have to, you got to make him uncomfortable. B, you gotta make somebody else other than Jarrett on that offense beat you, and you might want to invite them to beat you, but you cannot he just destroyed them on those catch and run scores early in the game that were disheartening. I just rewatched them for a story I posted to see what Maryland did. It was actually pretty clever. They were two different concepts. Twin sets to the right.
A couple of crossing routes against zone, weren't they?
Well, no, they weren't. It was actually because if you watch him, I'm going to send you the link. He was the inside receiver, and on both plays, Maryland ran version. He's the inside receiver, and they still were able to run rub routes to get him free with the outside receiver kind of sheltering the Penn State coverage. On the first one, it looked like there was a little bit of a communication issue between Tariq Castro-Fields and Jaquan Brisker, although it did look like Tariq was the guy that maybe was the one that took the cheese. And on the other one, it was actually Daquan Hardy who was kind of victimized. But they were very clever play designs that were essentially slants or shake routes. And he caught the ball 10 yards down the field. And then for a guy that's pretty big, he's almost 210 pounds. He can really move, and there was nobody, Dave, that was catching him.
The thing is, I was not at Beaver Stadium for that game during COVID. You were, and I have still never seen a complete field view like the coaches see of that play. And Jarrett was so far out the chute on TV in a frame that you couldn't really tell what the scheme was, but because he was gone. Yeah. And no one was even in his vicinity. Castro-Fields wasn't close to him. Right. And man, that's the thing with this guy. If he gets a couple of steps, it's over. I mean, you're depending on the safety to just run his ass down, and that ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen very easily either. So he is a problem. And your question to Franklin, what did he say to that? I can't remember what he said exactly. This is a little bit of a different unit than it was last year at that time.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at. He did say, even in the Penn State game or the Ohio State game, Stroud ended up with 305 yards, but it was really 2 plays in that game that really hurt Penn State. It was Olave's 30-yard catch on that over route. That was their first touchdown. And it was the catch and run by Jackson Smith. It's hyphenated. Jackson Smith. I think is it Najigba? Do I have that right, Dave? It was a play
that's one I still yeah.
It was a hitch on a 10-yard completion. He broke the tackle, and Penn State still was able to run the guy down, but it was a 58-yard play. You take the 58 yards and the 38 yards away on those two completions, and Stroud basically threw for 200 yards on 20 completions. He did say that they've played much better this year, but they just have to be careful against a talent like Jarrett. And he did say, yeah, we watched the film from last year. We all know what happened. So I think it's a strong point of emphasis this year that they're not going to take the bait on some of these rub routes they used to free up Jarrett last year.
What did you think also? Christian Veilleux was clearly the number two quarterback in pregame, and Roberson was basically unseen. I thought that was interesting that he's gotten more practice reps. That he likes his arm strength. His poise stands out, which is something that Roberson certainly didn't have at Iowa. You think he's the number two guy now?
Well, the door's been cracked, right? James said that Taquan was limited in practice going into the Ohio State game, and that because he was limited, the coaching staff felt like Veilleux was further along that particular week. Now, if they saw enough of him in a number two role with more reps that could influence how they look at the rest of the season. I don't know.
Yeah, but when I heard him pointing out poise, that piqued my interest. That when you ever hear a coach talk about a quarterback having poise, I especially what we saw at Iowa, that's worth considering.
Yeah, one thing on top of that, Dave, the more I watched the Ohio State game and I watched what Clifford did in game, they didn't really go quick. And a lot of times, Dave, right, we saw him trying to change the play late on the play clock, getting up to center, hand movements, yelling to the offensive line and the players. I think it's a pretty sophisticated scheme that Mike has that he trusts Sean to run. And I just don't think the guys behind him are in any way equipped to do all the stuff that Sean does at the line of scrimmage against a good team. So maybe he does have poise, but if they have to play him meaningful snaps against anyone, I just think it's going to be a very different looking offense. I just don't think there is a fail-safe backup option at quarterback for Penn State for the remainder of 2021, and they're going to have to get it right somehow, whoever the quarterback is in 2022. Because if it's not Clifford, a healthy Clifford, they're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, they are. All right. While we have a few more minutes, few more minutes left, have you looked at it? Who's your four for the first rankings tonight at 7:00, the college football playoff? Who do you like?
Yeah, so I think it has to, obviously Georgia has nothing to worry about. To me, I don't know, Dave. I know that Cincinnati is in there, and I would think we don't know that Cincinnati's in there. We don't know that at all. I mean, in the discussion. Yeah. To me, if you're asking me who it should be, or it's Georgia, it's Alabama, it's Ohio State. I don't particularly trust Oklahoma. I'm not sure the fourth team. We know the identity of the fourth team yet, but there's only so many options because I think it's a pretty significant drop off. And I'm just wondering about Michigan State moving forward.
You got Ohio State. You got Ohio State above Michigan State now.
If I'm going to build my top four, I'm going to put Ohio State in over Michigan State.
And Ohio State in over Oregon?
Yeah.
Even with a head-to-head loss at home to Oregon.
Yeah, I get all that. I think the defense is a lot tighter now. And I think that I just look at the Michigan State-Ohio State game that's going to be played later. And I'm just saying who I think are the four best teams. I think
that's
Michigan
what I wanted. I wanted your 4 best teams, not what you think's going to happen.
What Michigan State did against Michigan in the fourth quarter, they took the game from them physically, really resonates with me. And I just think that they're a team that if there's 5 teams going for 4 spots right now, they're one of the 5. But I don't know what's going to happen when those 2 teams meet. And I believe the game's in Columbus, but they're right there. I would say there's 5 teams for 4 spots now, 2 in the Big Ten, Alabama, Clemson. I'm not wild about Oklahoma. I'd probably throw in Oregon before I threw in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I would too. This is who I'd have. I got to do it 2 different ways.
Go ahead.
If I'm on the committee, I'm putting Cincinnati in there just to piss everybody off because it's a country club. It's a country club. And if you're going to have what you're calling a tournament based on merit, I want him in there simply because otherwise it's an invitational. And we all know that the Power 5 conferences are running this thing. I think they're opening themselves. If Cincinnati goes undefeated, they're opening themselves up for an antitrust suit. I really do, because this will be the last straw for the group of 5 schools. Anyway, do I think they're really one of the 4 best? No, I don't. I would say it's Georgia way up here, then Alabama about here, even though they've lost, and then I gotta put Michigan State in next, man. I mean, I don't know. You saw that Ohio State defense. Yeah. I don't think they're particularly very good, man. I still don't think they're good. We saw them get better supposedly against crap competition. They hadn't played anyone since Oregon, and they ended up looking like they did against Oregon. To me, I mean, I think they're vulnerable on defense, and I like Michigan State better with my eyeballs than I do Ohio State. And then I'll put Oregon in because Ohio State hasn't played that much a tougher schedule than Oregon has. Now, is Pac-12 football bad? Yeah, it's bad. And if you watch Pac-12 football, it's so obviously bad compared to what it's been in years, decades back. I know that. But those are my 4: Georgia, Alabama, Michigan State, Oregon, everyone else down the line. And it could change, but we'll see what happens.
Dave, as much as I was impressed by Michigan State, and I was impressed in the Michigan game, I can't shake the Nebraska-Michigan State game a couple of weeks ago when I thought Nebraska had them dead to rights late in that game, and they did in Nebraska. They did what they always do, and they found a way to muck it up. The Michigan State offense did nothing in the second half against a just okay Nebraska defense, and they gave it away with the special teams play and blew it. But
hey, they did very little against Indiana also. Yeah. I mean, they only scored 13 points against a beat up Indiana defense, which just gave up 38 to Maryland. So there is that. But look, they are mentally tough, and you can't take that away from them. And based on what we've seen so far, I mean, they put up a bunch of points and a bunch of points late, and they have something that so few of these teams in college football have right now: a great running back. I mean, Kenneth Walker is a terrific running back who will get you yards when you need it. To me, that matters. And I don't know that Travion Henderson is even that. He got away once, and that's valuable too, an explosive runner, but he's not a every down back who will get you 5 when you deserve 2, like Kenneth Walker is. Yeah. I love the toughness of this team, and they have a combination of toughness and a little bit of explosiveness too, with Peyton Thorne and all his wideouts. They're a very good team. They're not great on defense, but I like them. And to me, that you got to put them in at this point. Certainly, if it comes down to them only losing in Columbus in a competitive game, to me, I think they gotta be in there. Even in front of Oklahoma. What does Oklahoma prove? You want to talk about a Nebraska game? What about Oklahoma against Nebraska? Okay. Yeah. I mean, that if Oklahoma is even in the conversation with one loss, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Yeah. Dave, before we go, did you think the thing that fascinates me about Ohio State and Henderson, because they never really threw him to the wolves like they did with Penn State. He was a guy that was getting the ball because Master Teague was healthy, 6, 7, 10, 11 times a game in blowouts. This was like his first prep for maybe what lies ahead. He had a ton of carries against rugged defense. And this is the first time he had to kind of deal with some adversity, because things did not go his way until the second half. And I just wonder if he's going to benefit from this, because, the first couple of games that he played, he was just making splash play after splash play. And the numbers,
it's easy to do
9 yards a carry. And now he got his nose bloodied. And I thought,
that's right.
He took some good shots. I think it's going to be better for him moving forward. And I think you'll see him grow off of what Penn State was able to do. And Penn State really did a hell of a job on him, except for maybe 2 or 3 plays. And I think he carried it 27 times.
Yeah. I mean, if you take out the 68-yarder, he's got 27 for 92. And I want to see a guy get, and he's just a kid. He's just a kid where Kenneth Walker's a transfer, has been playing at Wake Forest. I mean, he's a serious, mature running back. But still, that's the situation we have here. That's why I really like Michigan State as the weather gets colder. Kenneth Walker is going to be in Manhattan for the Heisman Trophy presentation. I don't know if he'll win, but he's going to be there at this point. I mean, Gus Johnson was talking about, get your tuxedo now. and he was right. That's what I was thinking. Right? Yeah. I mean, that's valuable in a close, tough, tight game. A back like that. I didn't see that out of Henderson. Maybe you will in a couple of years, but I didn't see that right now, right?
Mel Tucker knows running back talent, man. Of all the guys he got to come to Michigan State, how good would Wake Forest be this year if they kept
I know. Yeah. With that guy.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch the Big Ten East play out between Michigan State and Ohio State. Michigan was close to closing the deal, but Michigan State would not allow them. They're going to play Penn State in a couple of weeks. We gotta go, Dave.
I got to mention this before we go, though, because it really bugged me, and I mentioned in the power poll. Didn't it strike you that, I mean, Cade McNamara is having a terrific game. He's having his best game. He threw for 383 yards, and still this convention of coaches trying to keep the second stringer, the big G whiz 5-star recruit from leaving for the portal. He puts JJ McCarthy in there, not once, but twice in the middle of the fourth quarter, and he fumbles twice. They only lost one, but he fumbled twice. Yeah. I mean, what have we become? What are coaches becoming? Constantly being fearful of that. And that's the only reason that Sharkface put him in the game, right? It's the only reason.
I think the irony is, of all the one coach you thought they wouldn't do it would be Sharkface, because he's a Bo Schembechler guy, and he'd be like, no. Yeah, I'm going to play my starter, and you're going to like it. And if you don't like it, I want a Michigan man to coach the Michigan team. Get out. I can't believe it was all people Sharkface caved.
I know. And we, of course, we don't know how much Josh Gaddis had to do with it, but it's Harbaugh's decision. At that point in that game, whether Gaddis wants to do it or not, it's his decision to say no. McNamara is having a great game. He has command. We don't unlatch his command at this point in this game. You don't do it. You don't put a freshman in there who can screw everything up, and that's what happened, man. That's what happened. That's where we've gotten in coaching and the transfer portal, where of course the flip side of Penn State is they don't have anybody prepared to be a backup. Because they've given so much to Sean Clifford. I think there's a happy medium in there someplace. Anyway, I had to get that in.
Dave Jones, would you agree that Dave, I would say that holistically, I think we've covered all the bases on this edition of the Blue White Breakdown podcast.
I'm happy for the opportunity, proud to have the opportunity to do this Blue White podcast. But I've got to go. The neighbors are here.
All right. Take care, guys. We'll be back in a little bit.